Now, let me introduce our speakers for today. We have Akshay Wariku, who's from Giesecke Devrient, Chavi Saragos from CaixaBank, and John Eric Setzos, who's an independent identity and fraud expert. I will now hand over first to Akshay, who will take us through the first part of the presentation, and then he will hand over to the next presenters.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I think as most of you have already seen that it is titled Rethinking Fraud in the Connected World. And maybe if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to paint a canvas and at least give you understanding of how at least I perceive the fraud landscape. So fraud, of course, has changed. And of course, then with this, our understanding must change too. So how I perceive is that initially fraud was like a wolf. We spotted it. It was technical, credential theft, malware, and we could use authentication monitoring and rules. What happened next was then the fraudsters started to wear sheep's clothing. It became disguised. Now attackers increasingly impersonated banks, fake merchants, and now it moved from identifying malicious activity to identifying deception. And after that, again, fraudsters evolved, and now the wolf started raising sheep. And with this, I mean they sort of created an environment that looked legitimate, from creating fake investment communities, from creating fake reviews, fake banking applications even. And I think I recently was at the GASA, Global Anti-Scam Alliance, where I recently spoke to one of the victims of the romance scams. And she told me, of course, back then her boyfriend, but a potential fraudster, he gave her access to his mobile banking app and she could navigate perfectly, could click on every possible things. And she saw $1 million worth of money in it. And of course, then all sorts of money drain happened, but she was sort of in this environment of engineering where it looked legitimate. So that's what I mean when the wolf started raising sheep. So engineering consent all around. And now, of course, most of us are aware that with AI, it is just weaponized. The scale at which it happens, the easiness at which a phishing site could be created, it has been industrialized. And now, of course, now that the fraud has evolved, the nature of customer involvement has also been changing. And with this, on the next slide, I just want to give you a representation of how we see different categories of the customer involvement in it. So if I was a customer earlier, I may be unaware and passive, so which means that it happens without my knowledge. Again, could be unauthorized access, large-scale breaches that I am not aware. After that, a consumer was often aware but was misled. So here, think of phishing campaigns or bank impersonation. I am aware what is happening, but somehow I am misled to do something. And the third category here is aware and manipulated. So fraud through engineering consent, or how John Eric likes to call it, hacking people. So think of high yield crypto schemes or the pick butchering or romance scams. So even if people know something is wrong, but they are deeply into that tunnel that it's even hard for them to back off. So this is just to paint a canvas of how we see fraud evolving and the involvement of me as a consumer in it. Now, historically, the security parameter of payments resided with financial institutions. And of course, you would see with this evolution of fraud, this parameter has dissolved. And on the next slide, I think maybe it would become a bit more clear, which I would like to call it as an iceberg of fraud, because banks do see the transactions, but a lot of manipulation already happens and there are a lot of actors involved here. So scam essentially does not reside with a single institution domain, but spans across a digital value chain. So here on social media platforms, fraudulent investment advertisements, or spoofed communications through telecoms, or in messaging applications, there is impersonations. All of this happen already, and the bank just sees the transaction happening. And of course, after that, the fraud is reported. And if you again click on the next slide, here again, a lot of people or industries involved here are not essentially incentivized to stop fraud. For example, of course, there was a study there where a lot of campaigns or advertisements on Meta were directly tied that they were either of prohibited services or even were potentially scams. But of course, until last year, they were not at all incentivized to stop it. Of course, now with the emergence of CASA or the ecosystem being more aware, Google, Meta, all of them are trying to be more active here. But still, within the ecosystem, a lot of them are not jointly in the fight for fraud. And eventually, a financial institution pays the brunt of that fraud. Now, of course, here collaboration is important, sharing is important. And on the next slide, you would see that sharing is definitely caring. And in the fraud report, you would find how Nordia collaborated with telecom operators here. And after spotting it within the 10 minutes, these phishing sites were blocked. And of course, once the information was shared, a lot of phishing cases were reduced. Of course, there could have been initial cases where they were prone to phishing, but in a greater run, a lot of people were secure with these phishing scams. So of course, sharing definitely is caring, and this is what we should be doing moving forward. But of course, it has a lot of hiccups. And the reason is, of course, if you move on to the next slide, we all know or we have seen, and I don't know if I would call it fortunate or unfortunate to meet one of our what happens on dark web. Fraudsters actually share a lot of information from a lot of cards that are working to a lot of IDs that they have spotted, and then they create this curated list of who could be potentially frauded. So fraud is networked, but our defense still remains fragmented. And of course, without cross-sector signal sharing and coordinated efforts, we would still be not at our full potential. And here, I think I see still two collaboration gaps. The first one we would like to call as operational gap, which would mean when a fraud is spotted by bank A and they need to reach to the bank B, it is still manual. It is still taking a lot of days when the money is moving faster. And by the time a bank would actually spot, it has already pushed into crypto and it's too late to recover the funds. And the second one is more related to intelligence gap, that a lot of banks or industries are experiencing fraud, but they are not sharing it with each other. And of course, with this, we have consortium-based sharing of suspicious entities or shared intelligence. There are regulatory frameworks coming up. There are some of the initiatives coming up. And I think the industry is moving towards this, but still a lot of work to be done on this landscape. And Xavi, I think, would now lead you into the world of data sharing regulations and what is going to happen in this space.
Yes, absolutely. As Akshay was saying, we have as an industry a gap because we have a fragmented view. But one of the main reasons, and that's what we reflect in the report, has been regulation. Now we see light at the end of the tunnel because there are two new regulations in place. One is the anti-money laundering, which is really in place, and the payment services regulation, which will be in place supposedly next fall, October, perhaps we will see the light. But what we had until now, what we had was GDPR, at least in Europe, and there were some jurisdictions that had some data sharing arrangements for fraud, and every one of them had different types of data sharing. We have cross-border data sharing in the Nordics. We have inside the country data sharing, and we had countries that had no data sharing at all. And the main stone on the road was always the data protection, the local data protection agencies, and strict interpretations of GDPR. So for us, and that's what you can see in the report, we have analyzed a little bit the part of data sharing both in AML and PSR, and this will be a substantial change in the near future. It's obviously that the objective is to strengthen this prevention, detection, and ecosystem collaboration, because as Akshay said, fraudsters are collaborating, and we are not, or not to the extent they are. And the key implication is that what was actually saying, that we are shifting from an institution-centric or jurisdiction-centric fraud control to a network-based intelligence. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, please. Obviously, this doesn't come for free. There are always challenges. Later on, John-Eric will go deeply in a survey we did on fraud. But here I wanted to highlight some little statistic to you. Respondents to the survey, to the question, what are the main barriers of limiting the effectiveness of cross-industry collaboration? 89% of respondents said that legal, regulatory, or data privacy constraints were the main barriers. So these new regulations seem to be the light at the end of the tunnel I was talking about, because they give the legal framework, regulatory confidence, and we believe that data protection issues will be easier to tackle with data protection agencies. Okay. And what is what is Europe doing? You know, in the next slide, you know, PSR in its Article 83A states that it's mandatory between PSPs, payment service providers across European Union, to share information on the grounds of fraud. And the recital says explicitly shall share. So it's an imperative. So it's mandatory. Okay. So the European Payments Council, that, as you may know, is the body in the SEPA payments area that makes money transfers happen. For example, is responsible for all rulebooks for instant payments or for BOP that recently came into practice last year. So the EPC began 14 months ago, perhaps, the Frida Task Force, which is a body dependent from the management board, that is seeking to build a European way of making compliance of this Article 83.A of data sharing possible for PSPs. It's not an easy task because, as I said before, there are a lot of different things happening in the SEPA area and European countries. There are countries that are having just one sharing arrangement, which is okay. There are countries that have no sharing arrangement at all. And there are countries that have more than one for different reasons, for example, Spain. Or there is still a very nice cross-border sharing between Nordic countries, which is the NCERT, that makes fraud information sharing available between Finland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Iceland. So this Frida Task Force is trying to make ends meet and build an infrastructure and a rule book to make PSPs be possible to share this information. So as I said before, fraud detection moves from a bank level to ecosystem level capability, and that's what Akshay was asking for, and this is what we will probably have. But bearing in mind the ship fable that Akshay mentioned, you know, ships used to stay in their own farms, okay? But as we evolve, okay, wolves, the shepherds, bring together ships and make them go cross-border. So the future is, okay, we are going to have European data sharing infrastructure. Okay, so we will have the wolves creating money mule structures outside Europe to prevent us to stop them. So the battle is on, as always, and we will continue to fight it. And a crucial thing in sharing information is, okay, what language do we speak? And that brings us to the next subject, which is taxonomy. Okay, why taxonomy is important? Context is important, but speaking the same language, as I was saying, it's crucial. Okay, it was also in the survey that we did some months ago. I think that it was 80-something, 90% of respondents that thought that it was to some or to great extent important to have a common language, a common taxonomy. Okay. So it's quite easy. It's a silly example, but for example, if somebody says you cannot trust Xavier, it's me, you can say, okay, I make a note. I have a mild alert. I'll take care. But out of context, you don't know how to use this information. But if somebody says, okay, you cannot trust Xavier because he usually speaks bad behind the backs of people, now you have a full pack of information. You have you have created some tags, speaking bad, speaking ill of people, and that is an information that will be valuable perhaps in the future. Perhaps you will not share any secret with Xavier. So that's the importance of taxonomy. I know it's a silly example, but taxonomy is a simple concept, but it's very, very difficult to achieve what the role of a good taxonomy would be. That it's standardize a classification, in our case, a fraud classification, enable comparison between things, and obviously exchange quality information. What we have done in the report is to compare 3 different taxonomies that we find all of them very good. And what is very interesting is that the strength in one is the weakness in the other. And what we see is that perhaps the main point is to be very, very aware that what is the objective of your taxonomy, because it will be better if you bear in mind what is your main objective. In Europe, for example, the most spread fraud taxonomy is the European Banking Association taxonomy. And we asked in the survey, as you see here in the slide, we asked in the survey, are you using any taxonomy or the EBA fraud taxonomy? And you see only 5% of respondents used EBA fraud taxonomy out of the box. Is it that bad? No, absolutely. EBA fraud taxonomy is a very well thought exercise. It has a yearly revision, and all the industry can participate in this revision. So, and it's been out there for like 7 years, perhaps. But, you know, people, as you see here, 42% of people say, okay, EBA fraud taxonomy is okay for me, but I will do some changes to adapt it to my own reality. And then we have a majority of the people that fully rely on their own taxonomy. So to sum up, taxonomy is very important to build trust, to speak the same language, and to know what, where, and who are you talking about. And speaking about trust, I perfectly trust that John Eric will have the floor and go on with the presentation without speaking badly on your backs. Thank you.
Thank you, Savi, for that introduction. So, well, I'll go through some of the attacks. So if you can look at the trends now, the next slide, please. So we are identifying some kind of attacks that are going on here. One is the NFC relay attack, which is quite interesting. The fraudster hacks the human, as I call it, tricks them into installing an NFC app on their phone, and then say, well, now we're going to verify your card. I mean, they pretend to be a bank or something and then verify the card. Actually, what happens when the victim uses the card is that NFC information is relayed, typically to a payment terminal. So it's a very simple setup. You just need to trick the user into installing this app. If we look at the next slide, it's a QR-based fraud, which we see as becoming more and more used. The center one is the parking meter scam. I guess you've all seen that, where fraudsters are adding a different QR code on parking meters. To the left one is one from the UK, where they're actually sending personalized letters in the post. So they're getting access to information about people, sending a personalized letter with a QR code that brings them to a fake site to harvest information or get payment details or something. And last year, the poster scam in Portugal was quite interesting, because there the actual fraudsters, they had managed to print and post several thousand posters throughout the city with a QR code. And this looked genuine. This was a post for getting a loan with DNB, and a lot of people were tricked by that one. On the next slide, it's the core of what I call hacking people, where you're using AI. And the point now with AI is that the fraudsters can do this so fast. They can get so much help with the AI to do the fraud. And especially with the deep faking, it's easy, as I've shown in my presentations, to deepfake the voice of anyone. You just need a little bit of audio to create a convincing deepfake. And we know about the big cases where Arup were frauded by a deepfake member of the board in the meeting. And also DNB Norway was attempted frauded early this year. So this is being used a lot by fraudsters, and it's so easily available. And we are at the point where it's impossible now for humans to distinguish a real photo from a deepfaked one. And then the next one, again, using AI, they can create personalized agents. This is really scalable. They don't need a lot of resources. You don't need a lot of manpower, and you can target a large number of customers with this scam, and then having the AI talk to the users. This is typically also used in romance scams and investment scams. The AI can talk to the user for a long time, and then at one time a human can go in. So we've given the fraudsters tool to be very efficient in doing their fraud. And that's the scary part, and that's what we need to be aware of and try to fight. So then let's look at prevention of fraud on the next slide. So just skip that one. Yeah, okay, this is actually another one that should have been 4, where you do account takeover by using stolen credentials. You log into the bank, but you need access to the second factor. So then you hack the user and say, well, you need to provide this information. A very classic scam. But then on prevention, we've added some case studies here. Bank of Ireland has set up an SMS verification number. So you have a dedicated number, which means if you receive a text message, you're in doubt if this is genuine or not, you send it to a number that's predefined, that a dedicated number for this. And this will then verify and send you a message back whether this is genuine or not. And you can see it's doubled in the number of messages from 24 to 25. So people are really using this service to verify that. They also have a mandatory SMS sender ID registry. So if you're going to send out ID messages, you have to be registered. And this also helps a lot. I know other countries are trying to do that, to try to stop spoofing, to try to stop fake actors from sending out messages. On the next slide, from Íslandsbanki, using a logo for authenticity. You say, okay, the authentic players, they will have this logo. But of course, the fraudsters became aware of this because they were asking people, why don't you believe me? And they told about this. So this was copied by fraudsters. So we really need to try to find a good sort of marking system that works, and that's really difficult to copy by fraudsters. The next slide is another case study from Eika-gruppen, where they're doing real-time behavior-based fraud detection and adaptive analytics, meaning you're looking at things at what time of day. I mean, if John Eric logs into the bank at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's probably not him because he's never online at that time. Or if I suddenly logged in from a Mac and not from a Windows or Linux system, that would be indicator. Or if you use the geolocation and you've moved very far, etc. So all this kind of behavior-based, where are you, when are you logging in, what are you doing, of course, the amounts you're transferring, etc. And they had a very big reduction in phishing losses. So these are just the highlights of those case studies. You can, of course, read more about those in the report. We can't reveal everything here. You have to read the report as well to get down to the details. I'm showing a couple of slides on the survey result, where we asked the members on how to prevent fraud. And this is a list of the top measures. And you can see there's a lot of different measures. I've added 2 green arrows because that's, I mean, I'm an identity nerd. I've been doing identity for so long. We see there's a lot of focus on strong customer authentication. You verify them, but it's low on secure onboarding and identity verification. And that, I find that interesting. I mean, typically we see that the verification is very strong when you onboard, but it's very weak when you're actually using an EID. Anybody that's using an EID know anybody can use it. There's no verification that I'm really using it. And personally, I think that's where we need to step up to make it so much more difficult for someone else. It's not going to stop that kind of attacks where you're hacking people, because then the person is going to use it. But the kind of attacks where somebody's using somebody else's EID. We have the cases with trafficking victims in industry that they are told to create their bank ID, but then the fraudster is using that to create a company and take up a loan, etc. That's, I think personally, something we need to look at. But you see several different results here, and you can see more information about this in the actual report. I've added another slide on detecting fraud. How is that done? And we see the high one here is rules-based fraud detection. Personally, the challenge with rules-based, it's fairly static. What we really need is more advanced mechanisms that's using AI to dynamically update this. I think there are 3 things in the detection. It's the rules. We need the rules because they are good. We need the AI, and we need people. I think that combination is really what's gonna do it. But again, from the survey perspective, this was definitely the highest one of detecting fraud. Then on my last slide, I've added priorities for future. Again, you can read all about this in the report, but having a 24/7 operation is important. Information sharing was already mentioned. We definitely need to share more information between the players. The fraudsters are doing this big scale, and we need, doing this big scale. So we need to do that. We also need to look at holistic fraud handling. We see a lot of silos that are looking only at one part of the picture. This combined with information sharing, I think, is going to be important. Looking at the recovery and refund gap cases. From what I've heard, I mean, the APP fraud refund hasn't really reduced the fraud. It's just protected the victims more, at least from the financial loss. But I mean, we need to look at that. Compliance, yes, was mentioned. That's important. Detection of mule accounts, and again, across banks, because fraudsters know we are not monitoring this across banks, so it's easy for them to set up multiple accounts in different banks and then transfer the money. So we need to do that, and then orchestration of all of this to be better at detecting and preventing the fraud. So that was the last slide, as far as I know. Then we have left some time at the end here for some Q&A. So I don't know, Elina, you will take over control of this. So if there are any questions, we are open to that now.
First of all, a huge thank you to all the three of you for running us through the report and the main findings, but not revealing everything, so people still want to read it. Very good. And to the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or write your question in the chat if you prefer to do it in writing. We have one question in the chat already, so we can take that while while we wait for other questions as well. So the question is about the general purpose European business wallets and citizens wallets, and how will verifiable identity building credentials from these wallets help in combating fraud?
Yeah, I can comment on that. I mean, the wallet has two sides of it. For one, a wallet will enable a two-way verification. I mentioned digital identities, but that's a one-way. I verify my identity towards the bank or the authority or something. If I ask, can you prove who you are? We don't have that mechanism. And I think that's an important part of the wallet, that we can provide this two-way. An employee in the bank can say, yeah, I can send you a push notification proving I'm really with the bank or insurance company and whatnot. So that's one part of it. The challenge, just to touch on that with a wallet, is that you're not allowed to monitor, you're not allowed to profile, etc. And that's exactly what we mentioned several times. That's what we need to do to catch fraudsters. And you can also transfer assets directly from wallet to wallet. So typically today, criminals would use cash to launder money. We're now giving them a digital equivalent of cash. So it's so much easier to use. So that may be a problem as well. So twofold, yes, identification, I think that's going to help. But then we have some things we need to look into as well.
Any further comments from the other two?
No, I think Jon Erik perfectly summed it up. So yeah.
Good. That was the only question we have so far. So I will now ask Eva if you're still here. I know, Eva, you've had some. Are you still here, by the way? I know you've spoken about the So you've spoken about the digital identity. Hi. So Eva's from Íslandsbanki, and she's one of the contributors also to the group. So I wanted to check if you had any thoughts on the digital identity wallet. I know you've been also raised a couple of times some issues with that in the future. So maybe you want to share your thoughts.
I did actually have a lot of thoughts. Thanks for offering the platform to do so. Can you hear me well?
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, I do think you touched well upon it regarding that the digital identity wallet does not allow device profiling. And I do think that's in stark contrast with what PSD2, the regulatory technical standard, requires us to do. We are required to device profile, to identify unusual monitoring and behavior of the client using our services. And this is doesn't seem to quite fit. But more worryingly, there does not seem to be a way to report these wallets as stolen when your phone gets stolen with 24/7 access in a confirmed manner. That doesn't seem to be a part of the design. So I do think that the ones who are making the architecture of the wallet, they need to consider what happens when the wallet is used in a way that is not how it was intended. What happens when things don't go as planned? What happens when a phone gets stolen and the PIN is stolen as well? If you get robbed, you're forced to say your PIN, like you're robbed. Okay, they take the phone. What happens then? Is the PID server going to have 24/7 access to the phone? I know the banks will, but the banks aren't the PID servers. So, yeah. So those are my thoughts. Really like the report, you guys. It's super.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Eva.
Thank you for your comments. I completely agree with you. And the challenge with stolen wallets is that in the future we're going to depend on the wallet for identification. Well, if it's stolen, you would need some auto-ban way of the proving who you are to prove it was really my wallet that was stolen, or I could, just say that your wallet was stolen. So that's a problem with that part. And also, I think forgetting that not every user is a nice user. The criminals were going to be using the wallet as well. And how do we handle that? And I agree with your reporting part. It's so there's still some challenges with the wallet. I think it's going to be good, but we're going to take some time before we get there.
Fantastic. Any other questions from anyone else in the audience? Please feel free to raise your hand. We have one. Sean Neary, please, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Hello. Thank you very much for the presentation. You very quickly jumped over the relay NFC and the app. So this has been a very dominant and growing sort of MO across specifically the Nordics, but globally. But in Denmark in particular, we've seen huge growth in the last 3 months. Could you go a bit more on actually how you feel like they're able to scale this and achieve such great increase in this MO? Because I'm still seeing many different ways they're achieving it, but your way was quite interesting to me on this NFC app. Could you put more light on that, please? Because it was very briefly discussed.
I'm not an expert on that. I mean, I explained it on a high level. Somebody else want to jump in and go into more details on the NFC relay attack?
I know Mario had a lot of information on it. Xavi, do you know?
Yeah, well, I know a little bit of it. Mario is the one who has the technical background, but I think at least in Spain the case was that fraudsters made the victim install a malware, and one of the things that that they did, and they convinced also the victim to uninstall the banking application. So if you're you have eyes on the device, if your application is on, but if they have deleted the application, you lose sight of it. So that was one of the main issues that that we had, at least in Spain. And there were a lot of different MOs, but the majority of the victims suffered. It was an NFC. You have to tap your card on the mobile, and then there was somebody at the ATM withdrawing money at the same second.
Okay, so they were basically saying to the customer, you need to verify by tapping the card to your phone, like you could do with a passport and stuff for verification. Then the NFC app is then taking that data and the tokenized package and then relaying it through the VM to somewhere else in the world. Okay, because I've seen a lot more about POSs and mobile POS, or where they're tapping someone's pocket in the back of a train. It was the first time I'd heard of this scenario, so that was very insightful. Thank you, Javier.
Okay.
Okay, we have another question in the chat. Any thoughts on how PSPs will share fraud information as per Xavi's part of the presentation? Is there any work being done on this currently? And great presentation and information as usual from the group. And this is Julius asking the question.
Okay, Julius. As I said, the EPC is working on it. And there will be a rule book for public consultancy in the next weeks, perhaps before the summer holidays. What I tried to explain here, and what we have seen in the report, is that obviously any data sharing arrangement has to be compatible with what is in place and working now. So nobody's thinking of for example, as I mentioned, the Nordic third is working, and it's working very well. So in any case, that should be embedded in a wider sharing arrangement. Okay. So any existing solution has to be compatible with future solutions. and it has to there has to be interoperability between all of them. But it's still under discussion. What data? Because well, I'm part of that group, by the way. We have thoughts on that, but then there's the legal team that will tell us, okay, so this will be allowed, this not. So we have to think very carefully on the data set that we are choosing, because we want the data protection impact assessment to be positive, to be allowed to share that data. So there are a lot of things that have to be balanced, but quick answer is anything that it's working should still be working and be wider. So that would be the.
And sorry, I know, Bo, you have your hand up, but just to add to Javier, your answer there, are you aligning to the RTS with PSD3 and PSR, which also introduced this mandatory data transfer, and then also
yes,
aligning
absolutely.
the taxonomy from EBA that you also sort of covered. Sorry to jump in, Bo.
The mandate that the EPC has is to develop a data sharing arrangement that makes possible compliance with Article 83A of PSR. That's the mandate that has the Free Data Task Force in the EPC. So that's the task of the group.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joey, for the answer, and thank you, Julius, for the question. Boo, you have your hand up, please.
Thank you. When we established Mobey Forum 25 years ago, I happened to be the first chairman for some years then. I couldn't quite see how high quality stuff we can get going like this here today. I've been so impressed by your eloquent and deep presentations. So this is really, I say a big thank you as the kind of mobile war veteran here. And then I have one question, because I'm now so busy with the European trust infrastructure. Obviously, every organization will have a European business wallet, and most citizens probably also will have one or the other wallet, should have before Christmas in EU. The question is that, have you connected? Do you see the identity building credentials as a vehicle for attacking fraud? How important is it, or is it important? Thank you.
That is a good question. As you understood from my previous answer, I've been looking more at how fraudsters can use it for a vehicle of transporting fraud. But I mean, one part of it is of course identification. That can be two-way. But interesting question. I don't have any answer to that as of right now.
Okay, sorry, I was out of the meeting here for a while, but I think it should be on the agenda, because everyone will have them. I mean, 160 billion reasons for lower administrative burden for enterprises to start with, when it becomes mandatory for the public sectors, according to EU.
Exactly. Eva touched on that. I saw you unmuted, so jump in, Eva.
Yeah, I was about to jump in. Now, I've been taking a look at the new EUD laws, and there is a chance for like large social media platforms to use this to get users to prove that they are who they say they are. So I do think that could increase consumer safety for consumers to be able to identify fraudulent sellers, or like, identity scammers that are pretending to be someone else. So that would be like a trust signal. So I do think that's positive regarding the mobile wallets.
Yeah, interesting. Just following up on that, I mean, the social media companies are making a lot of money of showing ads for fraudsters, right?
Yeah, that's what Akshay mentioned, the Reuters survey.
Exactly.
Or report.
Yeah. And with the wallet and a verified organization, well, maybe it's possible. I mean, hey, Facebook is going to lose money on this, but rather that than we get more fraud.
Fantastic. We have no more questions in the chat. We don't have any hands up, so maybe it's time to wrap up. First of all, a huge thank you to Akshay, Chavi, and John Eric for the absolutely fantastic presentation. Thank you to the audience for so many of you joining us, for all the questions and all the discussion. We will make the recording available and the slides available to everyone that was here. They will also be available on the website. The Sydney has put the link to the report in the chat, and it's also available on our website in case anyone wants to have a look at that. It's a good report. I recommend reading it. And yeah, with that, thank you so much, everybody. What a fantastic session. Look forward to seeing you all soon again.